And welcome to our next This Can Happen Insights. I am delighted to welcome Sarah Boddey from Northern Trust. Hello Sarah, good morning.
Hi Zoe, good morning. Hello everybody.
We are really pleased to welcome her for a number of reasons, but also Sarah and Northern Trust have just come on as our newest partner of This Can Happen this year, so we are delighted about that and really an extra special welcome. So I should say before we start that Sarah is very open to say that her internet is not great at home, and so we're just going to go for it and see how it goes. But we have all the bits and pieces next to us in case of any casualties, but do bear with us.
Indeed.
That's right, Sarah. At the moment, we're all good to go.
Absolutely, yeah. We have various backup options up our sleeve.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's kind of just dive in, and if you could just explain sort of your role at Northern Trust and maybe even a little bit about Northern Trust and where they are around the globe, so everyone kind of understands.
Yeah, sure. So I head up the diversity and inclusion team for our EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and our Asia Pacific regions. So that's about 40 locations in total that we're in. Obviously, we have a big presence in North America as well. Northern Trust is a global asset management and wealth management company. We're headquartered in Chicago. I'm based in the London office. And the diversity, equity and inclusion team that I'm part of is responsible for everything that DE&I touches. So we work in very close partnership with the business, with human resources to sort of hire, retain and promote as diverse and as inclusive a workforce as possible.
Great. Okay, so I should just say to everyone that I'm going to sort of have a little interview with you for about 15-20 minutes, and we do welcome questions. Some people have sent them in already, but people have the opportunity to ask you questions directly, which I will read out, which come through to me on my screen. So everyone, you should have a little question box to the right-hand side of your screen on the control panel. Feel free to write anything in there, and you can introduce yourself if you want to, but just know that the questions are completely anonymous. Even Sarah can't see them, only I can see them. So if you don't want to say your name, it's not a problem at all, and we will just ask Sarah the questions. So Sarah, just to kind of start off, what has it been like for you over this time for the business and for your people?
Yeah, it's been a challenging few months for sure with this global pandemic. I was speaking to a colleague just yesterday and saying that in many ways the start of the pandemic feels like a very long time ago now, almost a lifetime ago. Yes, obviously it started impacting us here in Europe more in sort of end of February, beginning of March. But as I mentioned, I cover Asia Pacific as well, and obviously it was something that they were dealing with right from the end of last year. So yeah, it's been well over 6 months now that we as an organisation, a global organisation, have been dealing with this. And the impacts have been profound in good ways and some not so good ways. I think it's been fantastic to see how quickly the organisation has mobilised to get everybody working from home. We are a business and industry that can fairly successfully work from home with obviously the right technology and so forth in place. So getting our 20,000 plus people all working from home within, in some cases, big pockets within a matter of days, and jobs that we never thought possible to work from home, that had always been chalked up as too difficult to work from home. All of a sudden, again, within a matter of days, it was possible to do that. So that's been great to see. But in terms of the impact on our well-being, yeah, it's been challenging, and it's something we've had to really keep in focus. Very long hours for some people as we try to do this wholesale shift of our business to working virtually. And a lot of work and emotion sitting behind that, worry about family, about health are never easy at the best of times. But when the entire organisation is sharing that worry, albeit in personal ways, you really start to feel that on the psyche of the organisation after a while. And so we've had to do a lot to really keep an eye on that and give people the resources that they need.
Okay, so, concentrating on this kind of global piece, which is obviously your bag, how do you roll something out, especially when it comes to mental health, obviously our main focus, but obviously there's been so many focuses over this pandemic. Globally, when every market is different, is there such a thing as a consistent mental health strategy for you? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes and no. I think it's interesting with our wellbeing approach, like actually many other things within the diversity and inclusion space. Yes, there is an overarching global strategy and global approach, but executed very locally. And that always has to be the case because, to your point, things are so different in different countries around the world. That said, mental health and well-being, the concepts that underpin good mental health and well-being, is the same wherever you are around the world. But yes, how it manifests itself, the acceptance of how much mental health is even talked about in the workplace is different from country to country. So we always have to localise our approach. We are definitely at different places in our strategy in terms of execution in different countries around the world. And that's got to do with, yes, local cultural norms, sometimes the size of our office as well. What you might do in an office with, say, only 50 people is very different to what you might be able to offer and the types of supports you'd have to put in place for an office with 5 or 10,000 people in it. So all of those little nuances you have to work through when you're trying to execute on the strategy.
And in terms of the different markets, so for example, I think you've said to me over half your workforce are in the US, with your head offices in Chicago. How does that compare to here, sort of from a mental health point of view? Anything that you've been doing, is it lapped up as much? Is it welcomed as much in the US? Where are they in comparison to the sorts of things that you're doing here?
Yeah, I'd say, again, there's huge differences within countries within these regions. We operate across 3 main regions. So, as I said, Europe, Middle East, Asia Pacific, and then North Americas, which is largely just the US. We have a small operation in Canada as well. And I think it's fair to say that the Europe, Middle East, region were definitely the ones that started on their mental health journey, if you can call it that, long before the other regions did. We had need there. We had line managers in particular in the business wanting to be more skilled and more expert in how they could support the mental well-being of their staff. The cultural differences in Asia in terms of just how little mental health is even talked about in the workplace was something we tackled quite early on. And North America are probably, only just coming up the curve to some extent now. Again, because I think culturally things are different over there. There isn't the same. There isn't some of the same sort of training and so forth in place. That's only something that they're starting to look at now. Even though, yeah, as you said, just under half our workforce are in the US. But that's okay. It's not about taking one size fits all and trying to say, right, this worked in the UK or this worked in Luxembourg, so that's going to be fine for the US. You have to take all of those things into account and often meet the business where they are, not where you want them to be or where you'd like them to be, but where they are right now. And it's been great to be able to kind of pivot around those different regional approaches.
And I think that's a really valid point that you made, that it's about, not where you want them to be, which, with best intention is probably what a lot of us try and push places to be somewhere that they're not ready yet. But have you seen from a mental well-being point of view, this pandemic has maybe furthered that conversation than it would have done already at this point?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. And it has also speeded things up in the same way that I gave examples of some jobs that could never have been perceived to have been done from home a few months ago. We rolled out a global mental health and wellbeing site with lots of resources for individuals. We'd had a version of that going in EMEA for quite a while, and something that we want to globalise, but pre-pandemic it was just like, oh, we'll get there, and all these levels of approval and people that needed to sign things off, and actually when the pandemic hit, as I said, particularly on the European and then US shores, we moved from having kind of nothing in place in terms of a global site to it fully launched to all of our 20,000 partners. We call our employees partners. Within 10 days, which is just, we're a kind of old traditional bank. Things move slowly sometimes. There's no way pre the pandemic that we would have got that done in 10 days. We may possibly even have waited 10 months to get something like that done. So that's what I mean by the sort of silver linings that I think you can take from awful, tragic situations like the pandemic that we're facing at the moment, is sometimes they do just sharpen focus. And that was led right from the top. That was from our most senior management group saying we need to get people the resources that they need, the help that they need, the support that they need. What actually do we already have in place? Are there pockets of best practice, like what you guys have been doing in EMEA already, that we can take, not reinvent the wheel, not start from scratch again, and expand across the globe? And we put a team together and got it done really, really quickly, which was great to see.
Brilliant. So in terms of things that you have been doing for your staff, because I think you mentioned that you are at a point where some people have been bereaved, that your colleagues have lost members of their family. What practical things then have you been doing as examples across the globe for your staff?
Yeah, so absolutely. Unfortunately, with an organisation our size and with the global reach that we have, it was sadly obviously only, of course, a matter of time before some of our employees were affected very directly by COVID. Obviously, some of them became ill themselves. And so there was a whole raft of supports that we put in place for people who themselves were unwell. And then sadly, as time went on, certainly some of our colleagues who were facing bereavement. And of course, we all know that it has been bereavement in a very unusual, unprecedented and strange set of circumstances. And a lot of the things that we would usually do to support a colleague during a time of bereavement, we weren't able to do, or we certainly weren't able to do in the same way that we would have done prior to the pandemic, mostly down to social distancing. And so we really had to pivot around that and say, how else can we support colleagues who are bereaved, even though we can't physically, be with them. And their manager and their teams can't physically be with them to comfort them and do all the very human things that one would do during a bereavement. So we really had to kind of relook at all of that and relook at all of our processes, our provisions, the external organisations that we work with, from our employee assistance programme. We have a great relationship with Hospice UK here as well, who provide a lot of really, really great resources around dying and bereavement, not just for end-of-life care. So again, we spoke with them. How can we make those available to a wider audience? How can we promote those a little bit more?
Okay, great. What about the role of HR around the globe at this time? Because that must have, that's a tough job as well. Probably one of the toughest they've had to face. How have you managed that and supported them?
Yeah, that was on my mind very early on. Having having worked in HR all my career, I know what it's like from the inside, and I know it's often difficult to remember that human resources professionals are humans themselves as well. Yes, it's absolutely our job to support people, particularly during these difficult times, but we are human as well. All those challenges I spoke about that people were facing, fears about their own health, fears for their family, etc. We were all facing that as well, at the same time as having to work, day and night often to try and provide all the resources to people. Going back to the issue around bereavement, particularly our HR call centres around the world and our HR business partners who were obviously only able to do their work on the phone, they were having to field very, very difficult calls from people, difficult calls when we were assessing people's risk to COVID, had they been exposed to somebody, and then sadly, as we were hearing about colleagues that had been bereaved, talking to them about what had happened in the most, tragic circumstances, sitting and listening to them about how they couldn't be with their loved ones when they went to hospital, they couldn't be there when they passed away, they couldn't go to the funerals, all the things that we have, we've seen in the news, but having to really sit with them with that. And so we actually tried to put a lot in place to make sure that the well-being of our HR colleagues was paramount as well. I did some sessions with them, particularly the HR service centre colleagues who were fielding those calls quite a lot, to talk to them about their own mental health and well-being. The helpers need support during this time as well, so we really try to make that a focus too.
Okay, great. I'm looking to my screen. It's not that I'm not looking at you. There's quite a few questions coming through, so I want to turn to those. But one more of my own questions. In terms of mental health first aiders, is that something that you roll out across the globe at the moment? Is that UK focused? And whatever the answers to that is, what has their role been during this time?
Yeah, so we started rolling out a mental health first aid program a couple of years ago now. Yeah, 2.5 years ago now. We started with the UK, Ireland and Guernsey. They're just our sort of primary locations here. I'm an instructor for Mental Health First Aid England. I'm allowed to deliver the content in those 3 locations. So we have hundreds of mental health first aiders now trained across to serve that EMEA region. We then began last year over in Asia Pacific. We tried where possible to stick with the mental health first aid option. So it is available in places like Australia, in places like India. In some locations, we had to look slightly differently. There's another organisation called Mental Health First Responders. As you can imagine, the content is very, very similar. So in the Philippines, for example, we went for that. We started there more with the HR community, again, just because of some of the cultural differences. We felt that the HR community needed some of that toolkit building before we then rolled it out to the business. And then we will look at something similar for the US this year. And yeah, their role has been crucial through all of this. Part of all of the promotions and communications that we were doing was reminding people that the first aiders were there, reminding them that they could have a confidential chat with them. And my team has also kept in contact with the first aiders to again, helping the helpers, supporting the helpers. What have you found? Have you been called more? Have you been called less? Are people calling with COVID-19 related anxieties and experiences that they want to talk about? So yeah, they've been a vital part of how we have reacted to this.
Okay, great. Let me just go to a few of the questions. So this one just might go over something that we've already spoken about, but maybe taking a few steps back. So somebody says, I lead a team promoting positive mental health in our UK offices, and we're looking to roll out globally over the next few months. How do you go about understanding how markets such as North America and Asia approach or digest mental health information differently to the UK due to the different cultures, and adapting your approach to meet the different level of stigma that different countries have. So basically, how do you start globally?
Yeah. So I think, first and foremost, speak to people on the ground, right? Yes, I over my years in diversity and inclusion, I have a very good sense how this looks differently from country to country, but I'm not in the ground in the Philippines, in India, wherever, and I have, a wide variety of colleagues who are. So, I think, and that has to be a constant, keeping your finger on the pulse of how this or any other topic is being, is being perceived. I think working with local partners where you can as well is really, really important. So that could be existing organisations that you perhaps already partner with. Do you have something like a global health insurance programme, an EAP, again, where they have resources on the ground, people on the ground that could give you some of that insight, or indeed actually forging new relationships with specific organisations in the countries that you're looking at to bring you that insight. In Asia, we work with community business quite a lot, who do a huge amount in the mental health and wellbeing specific to the Asian context. But there's all sorts of equivalent organisations to something like Mind or something like that, where you can go and really get that insight. So talk to your own people, I guess, on the ground first to really find out what's going on, and then partner with reputable quality external organisations as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Actually, just sorry, do you know offhand, somebody is saying, you mentioned mental health first responders, for example, in the Philippines, what the equivalent is in North America?
So they do have mental health first aid in North America. I believe actually they also have mental health first responders there too. As I said, our preference, because it's what we started with, is always to go with mental health first aid if it exists in the country that we go into, and we only look for alternatives if that isn't the case. But definitely in the US, they definitely have mental health first aid, and I'm pretty sure they have responders too.
Okay, great, thank you, great. And the person says your answers have been really helpful. Okay, so I think it'd be useful to understand from you the challenges, some of the challenges you faced in dealing with mental health and engaging employees. How has it been? There must have been some challenges. It can't have been easy at all.
Oh no.
So what's been your main method of engagement?
Mm-hmm. No, of course it hasn't been easy. Starting this work anywhere when you are, dealing with decades of the stigma and discrimination connected with mental health. It's always difficult. I think again it's dependent from country to country. In some countries, we have focused much more on well-being because that seemed to be an easier route in for people, looking after your well-being rather than talking about poor mental health. Now, that's not to say that eventually we didn't, we shied away from talking about mental health. We incrementally pushed the business towards that, but in certain cultures, starting with an overall concept around well-being was easier. In other countries, I would say particularly here in Europe, it was really a lot of our line managers who were pushing for that extra skill set. So we've done some of the work of sort of awareness building. We've done some events with some interesting speakers around mental health, and there was good engagement in the topic. But what our line managers were saying they were really missing was, what do I do? Okay, great, I'm now a bit more aware about mental health and how it can impact people in the workforce. But if I see one of my team members struggling, or, what do I actually do? How do I have that conversation beyond just saying, oh, maybe you better go and talk to HR? What do I as the line manager actually do? So yes, we've faced lots of challenges, and we're not done. Even in a country like the UK, where we've made a lot of progress, external factors have helped us in certain countries. I definitely think the work that our royal family have done in the UK around promoting mental health, talking about mental health, has just helped. It is in the press so much more now than it ever has been in the past, and that all helps to sort of oil the wheels of the conversation internally as well. So finding those pockets in whatever culture you're working in, and pivoting again to what's going to work best there.
Okay, great. I've got a few more questions coming in here. I'm conscious of time. So somebody has said, working remotely has further increased the need for demonstrations of kindness. Have you managed to achieve this?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think it's the whole working from home, working remotely thing, again, has brought challenges and has been fantastic. Even specifically in the mental health space, I know for some people it's been detrimental to their mental health. I know some people that it's been, completely the opposite for, who've absolutely relished and found managing, perhaps periods of poor mental health easier when they're not having to do the commute and so forth. So of course there's no one answer there. But what sort of specifically were they referring to there, Zoe? Did they
just demonstrations of kindness, whether
Okay.
Working remotely has increased the need for that, maybe being a little less harsh on ourselves. I just think perhaps the sort of broader question is, how has working remotely changed the way that we're all working, especially with regards to kindness and our mental health?
Yeah, I think it's one of those areas where I think going to this fully working from home environment has almost just sort of shone a light on what you were like as a manager already. So I find, our line managers who were already, used to managing remotely, obviously got on board with it, quite quickly. And some of our managers just didn't have the nature of their jobs, the nature of their teams was such that they hadn't really managed very much remotely before. So again, we, put a lot in place quite quickly to help those individuals build their toolkit on how to manage virtually effectively, because it's not something that everybody just instantly knows how to do well. And a big part of that is connection and, yes, kindness as well. And we've put other engagement pieces in place. We have this thing called Connect in the Cloud, where there's a topic every week and you post photos around, a favourite place you visited, a picture of your pets, lots and lots of different themes. And that's been lovely. And people have said, I've got to know something about a colleague that I've worked with for 10 years. And I never actually knew that they had a dog, or that they'd been to that place on holiday that I went to 10 years ago. And building those connections, even in the virtual world, is really important.
Yes, and perhaps some of us have built those connections much more so, funnily enough, in the virtual world, making much more of an effort. Okay, so just sort of as a final point, pulling everything together. So what does the future hold for you, moving forward with a global look at mental health? What's next? Where are we going from here?
Yeah, I think it brings full circle to what I was saying at the beginning, really, which is I'm trying to look for the silver linings in this. It has been difficult. It continues to be difficult. But I do think the silver lining from a mental health and wellbeing point of view is the increased focus that has been brought on this. And so really, I see my job now as just kind of capitalising on that. And as we start to work in this new way, as we start to, think about returning to a new normal. I don't like to say the old normal because I don't think the old normal was working for a lot of people actually, but the old world normal wasn't working for a lot of people. So I think it's a real chance to take the silver linings from this, to continue the work that we have been doing, the progress that we've been making in certain countries, and then really boost it in other countries. You know, I gave the US as an example before. We've had such a good reaction to that resources site that we launched by US colleagues. So how can we build on that? How can we use the momentum of this pandemic to really carry on?
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing all these things. The good thing is that we got through it all. We could hear you. We could hear the whole thing. The internet was good.
I can breathe a sigh of relief.
Absolutely. It shows how grateful we are for these little things now that we never would have thought of. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us and being so
no problem. Thank you.
About everything that you're doing, and to thank you, the audience, for asking such great questions and being with us today. We really appreciate it. This Can Happen Insights program continues next week, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you, Sarah. Have a good rest of the day, and I'm now going to end the session.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Zoe.